Welcome to the West Virginia Purchasing Division's Vendor Resource Module for Purchasing Methods. The Purchasing Division developed this Vendor Resource Module series to assist any vendor who wishes to conduct business with the state of West Virginia to learn the state procurement process, as well as to highlight the vendor's responsibilities in this process. Should you have questions following this presentation, you may find additional information on the Purchasing Division's Vendor Resource Center. The link to this site will be provided at the end of this presentation. Let's get started. In this presentation, I will highlight the various purchasing methods commonly used to procure commodities and services for West Virginia state agencies. I will briefly discuss the bid submission process, and finally, I will explain the evaluation procedures for each type of purchasing method. There are several types of purchasing methods used to acquire commodities and services for West Virginia state agencies. These methods include requests for quotation, requests for proposal, expressions of interest, and requests for information. I will explain these purchasing methods in more detail in the coming slides. The most commonly used purchasing method by the West Virginia Purchasing Division is the request for quotation, herein referred to as RFQ. An RFQ is an invitation for vendors to bid on state purchases. For purchases expected to exceed $25,000, the RFQ is the standard form used to solicit and submit bids. The RFQ contains detailed specifications of the commodities and services an agency wishes to procure, in addition to all terms and conditions that must be met by the vendor. All bids will be opened in a public forum, referred to as the bid opening. In order to be considered, the vendor must submit all completed documentation required for solicitations expected to exceed $25,000 to the Purchasing Division by the established date and time, or directly to the requesting state agency for any solicitation expected to cost $25,000 or less. The bid must be signed by the vendor to be considered valid. Unsuccessful vendors are not compensated for the development and submission of bids. Although the RFQ form issued by the West Virginia Purchasing Division should be used to prevent confusion or errors, substitutions for the RFQ form may be made only if the terms, conditions, and provisions offered by the vendor are equivalent to the official RFQ. Submission of an alternate bid form that contains conflicting terms and conditions may be cause for rejection of the entire bid. The bid submitted to the Purchasing Division must be signed by an individual authorized to legally bind the person, partnership, company, or corporation submitting the bid. The vendor should also indicate on the envelope the date and time of the bid opening, the state Purchasing Division buyer, and the requisition number. An example of what this information should look like is included on the slide in front of you. It is the vendor's responsibility to deliver the original bid to the Purchasing Division prior to the established bid opening date and time. Bid packages are available for electronic download in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin by paid, registered vendors from the Purchasing Division website. Vendors may also request a hard copy of the solicitation by visiting the Purchasing Division at 2019 Washington Street East in Charleston, West Virginia. A hard copy may also be requested by calling 304-558-2306 or visiting the Purchasing Division's website at the link on the screen in front of you. Signed bids submitted by fax transmission may be accepted in lieu of sealed bids if the completed bid is received prior to the bid opening time. The state accepts no responsibility for the unsuccessful and/or incomplete receipt of bids submitted by any electronic means. In cases where a bid bond is required, the original bid bond should be received within 2 working days following the specified date of the bid opening. When the RFQ process is used, competitive bids are received, properly evaluated, and awarded to the lowest responsible bidder who meets the specifications. Generally defined, a responsible bidder is one who has a reputation for good performance, financial stability, and is able to furnish the required needs of the agency as requested. After a proper evaluation, if an award is made to a vendor other than the lowest bidder, a thorough justification is written and retained for public record and inspection. The RFQ includes the quantity, except for indefinite quantity open-end contracts, the ship to and build to addresses, all service requirements, maintenance, repair, warranty, and any special conditions required by the spending unit. If any portion of the request is unclear, it is the vendor's responsibility to request clarification from the state agency or buyer at least 5 days prior to the bid opening. Please be aware a deadline may be established in the RFQ for technical questions relating to the solicitation. Specifications and commodity descriptions in RFQs are prepared in a manner to encourage all vendors who can meet the state's requirements to bid. Specifications should be reviewed, and if vendors determine that they are too restrictive, they must send a written protest to the purchasing director at least 5 working days prior to the bid opening. If no protest is received, it is determined there are no objections to the specifications. You may view the Vendor Remedies online vendor resource module for additional information on protest procedures. If it is determined, either before or after the bid opening, that commodities or services having different specifications or quantities are required for the intended use, and it is in the best interest of the state, the purchasing director has the authority to rewrite the RFQ and issue a rebid. When submitting a bid or proposal for purchases expected to exceed $25,000, vendors may refer to this checklist to ensure the necessary precautions for a complete and competitive bid or proposal. The vendor should check that its signature is included on the bid or proposal before it is submitted to the purchasing division. When applicable, the vendor must include the required bid bonds. All bids or proposals must be submitted by the date and time established for the bid opening in order to be considered. Vendors may offer an alternate as an or equal option as required by the specification instructions. The vendor should review its bid to ensure that it meets all mandatory requirements stated in the solicitation. If a mandatory pre-bid conference is scheduled, the vendor must attend in order for its bid or proposal to be considered. And finally, the vendor should respond appropriately to the addenda when applicable. The next type of procurement method utilized by the West Virginia Purchasing Division is one of best value procurement. Best value procurement is a purchasing method used to acquire services where the specifications or scope of work may not be well defined and cost is not the sole factor in determining the award. One such type of best value procurement method utilized by the West Virginia Purchasing Division is a request for proposal, herein referred to as RFP, which is used to solicit proposals from potential bidders, taking into consideration criteria and scoring methods as defined in the RFP. Such criteria factors may include the vendor's firm and staff qualifications, references, copies of any staff certifications or degrees applicable to the project, proposed staffing plan, and proposed methods to furnish the required services. All RFPs follow the standard format defined by the West Virginia Purchasing Division. This format addresses required areas and enables the agency to modify the background and scope of work to meet its needs. All evaluation criteria will be clearly defined in the specification section and based on a 100-point total score. The proposal must be submitted in 2 distinct parts, technical and cost, with the cost portion sealed in a separate envelope. The cost is opened after the completion of the technical evaluation and shall represent a minimum of 30 of the 100 total points in the criteria, unless otherwise approved by the purchasing director. The technical portion shall represent 70 points of the 100 total points possible. West Virginia Code states that the bid must be received by the Purchasing Division prior to the specified date and time of the bid opening. The West Virginia Purchasing Division does not accept late bids. Therefore, failure to deliver or non-receipt of the bid by the Purchasing Division prior to the appointed date and time will result in the rejection of the bid. The vendor is solely responsible for the delivery of any and all bids to the Purchasing Division in accordance with this law. For solicitations expected to exceed $25,000, all bids are opened publicly by 2 or more persons from the Purchasing Division. Vendors will be given notice of the date, time, and location of the public bid opening, either in the original solicitation or by addendum. Immediately following the bid opening, bids may be viewed upon request from any vendor. The Purchasing Division will open only the technical proposals on the date and time specified in the solicitation, also known as the technical bid opening. A Purchasing Division representative will read aloud the names of those who responded to the RFP and confirm that a sealed cost proposal has been included in the bid. An RFP evaluation committee will review the technical proposals, assign appropriate points, and make a single written technical recommendation to the purchasing division buyer. Vendors must score a minimum of 70%, or 49 points, of the total technical points possible to be considered as a qualifying proposal. All vendors not attaining the minimum acceptable score, also known as MAS, will be considered to have submitted a non-qualifying proposal. If the purchasing division buyer approves the committee's technical recommendation, the information is then forwarded to an internal review committee within the purchasing division. Upon approval of the technical evaluation from the internal review committee, the purchasing division will schedule and notify vendors of the date and time of the cost bid opening. The cost bid opening is similar to the technical bid opening, whereas all cost bids are publicly opened and read aloud. Although all cost bids for qualifying and non-qualifying proposals are opened, only those which meet MAS are considered. The RFP Evaluation Committee will review the cost proposals, assign appropriate points, and make a final written recommendation based on the highest scoring vendor to the purchasing division. Please note that at the time of bid submission, qualifying vendors may request vendor preference as outlined in West Virginia Code. Such preference is an evaluation method only and will be applied only to the cost bid. This preference does not apply to construction. A certificate of application is used to request preference. Generally, a West Virginia vendor may be eligible for 2.5% preferences in the evaluation process for a maximum total of 5%. An additional preference allows qualifying resident vendors who are a veteran of the United States Armed Forces, the Reserves, or the National Guard to request preference for their residency status. Resident veterans who qualify may receive a preference of 3.5%. A final preference type is available for non-resident small, women, and minority-owned businesses. The purchasing division will make the determination of the vendor preference as applicable. Once approved by the buyer, the contract is generated and approved by the purchasing division, forwarded to the Attorney General's office for approval as to form, returned to the purchasing division, encumbered, and then mailed to the successful vendor. Notification is made to the unsuccessful vendors at that time via a faxed letter. Another type of best value procurement method utilized by the West Virginia Purchasing Division is the expression of interest. Expressions of interest are used primarily in the selection of architectural and engineering services. A response to an expression of interest should include a statement of the firm's qualifications and performance data, and may include anticipated concepts and proposed methods of approach to the project. Expressions of interest follow a standard format which addresses required areas and enables the agency to modify the requirements and description of the work to meet its needs. The final purchasing method used is a request for information, which is a document used to solicit information, data, comments, or reactions from possible vendors. A request for information may precede the issuance of a request for quotation and/or a request for proposal, and is used for informational purposes only. No award may be made from a request for information. Should you have questions about the information covered in this Vendor Resource module, you may visit the Purchasing Division's Vendor Resource Center at the link on the screen in front of you. Additional information can be found in the Vendor Procurement Guide, also listed on the screen in front of you. Thank you for taking the time to view this Purchasing Methods Vendor Resource module.